What is your frick this, I'm out moment? I was poached by a company which seemed like a leader in the field. It was a good opportunity and they brought me on to build out a specific offering at their agency. Even at my old agency we had done some competitor research that basically said these guys were the best of the best. So when I got the offer, it was a no-brainer. But then I get there and it turns out the department I'm in is complete garbage. The rest of the company seemed pretty good, doing interesting stuff. But leadership didn't care about our department much and the people leading it weren't really invested. And so it was basically a bunch of junior employees just doing whatever they thought was right. I didn't really have a direct way of influencing that since I was like a support piece to the main department. I'd work on their projects for a particular purpose, but didn't have any authority over their projects as a whole. Still, I figured once I was there a while, I could push for some changes and try taking on more of a leadership role. Anyway, I'm there almost a year and I get invited to speak at an industry conference. I had spoken at some conferences before, and so that's not unusual. The speaking engagements were on my resume when I applied, and I had assumed they were seen as positives by the company when hiring me. However, they tell me I'm not allowed to go. They have a policy that speaking engagements are reserved for VPs and above. So, I asked them about making an exception, that it's a good opportunity for the agency to be represented at the conference. They won't budge. I say I can pay my own way. They still don't budge. I say I can just go as myself then. And I won't mention the agency. I have my own small company where I do similar work basically as a freelancer with a small team of people. So I could have been Claiborne from Claiborne LLC instead, but they say it doesn't matter. That I'd still be seen as a representative of the company and they can't approve it. The conference was in Las Vegas and I had never been. So, I wanted to go and decided I'd just go anyway. They're like, well, we said you can't. And I said, yeah, but I'm going. We'd have to let you go then. Okay. So, I guess I was fired. I went to Las Vegas and made a little vacation of it, and it was one of my favorite presentations I've done. It was about the psychology techniques behind social media networks, and Vegas was a nice place to visit. I got to see Penn and Teller, and I lost about $300 gambling. Montgomery, Al. 2 years ago driving down south with my girlfriend. 3 AM gas stop while she's asleep. Walk into prepay. As I walk out, see a huddle of crack whores taking hits and handing their money to their pimp who's dressed in the whole 70s era pimp suit. Feathered hat and cane and all. They all frick for just 20 bones my man. I've never been back to Alabama. Similar to an unkindness of ravens or a murder of crows, a group of crack whores is called a resentment. You saw a resentment of crack whores taking hits and handing money to their pimp. You two sucks. Frick you Bono. I was transporting an LVAD patient to a doctor's appointment. She had some depression issues. She stops getting ready, says you know what, I think I am done. She unplugs her LVAD and starts yelling at everybody in the room. For those unaware, LVAD is an electrical pump device for end-stage heart failure. Now when you unplug them, there is a 15-minute battery on the actual unit. When that fails it could be minutes or the patient might not go at all. Luckily for me, I was the least qualified in the room of nurses and a doc, so I just quietly left. I design these things for a living, and this comment freaks me the frick out. Was married for 14 years to a not nice to me man. We had 2 children he basically ignored. One day our 4-year-old daughter crawled into his lap for a hug. He threw her on the floor. Less than 6 months later, money saved, belongings packed and I was out of there with the kids. Even though he told me I wouldn't be able to make it without him. Never looked back. Good for you. When my college professor required us to sign up for a class at a different college and pay full price to get credit for his class, I said frick this and dropped out. That sounds horrendously illegal. I worked at a dog daycare for 8 years, which was also my first job ever, and poured every bit of my heart and soul into working there. Well, not in the beginning because I was young and wild lol, but for the last 5 or so years I got a much better work ethic and took it seriously. I started at $6.75 and worked my way up to $10 after many years. The work was exhausting and emotionally draining. The way the managers ran things, there would often be dog fights, or they would put a huge group of young dogs together and the person watching that yard would be so stressed the whole time trying to keep track of 15 crazies. I had been there the longest and the dogs listened to me pretty well, so I would often get put in the most stressful yards. I noticed a trend when I was allowed to make the play groups. It was always peaceful, because I knew how to group dogs based on age, temperament, play style, etc. But when anyone else did it, one or more yards would always be complete chaos. The manager never listened to my suggestions for grouping dogs, even though I was out there with them for 6+ hours a day and she was out there for maybe an hour a day. That among other things, I would often come in hours early and stay late to help out with cleaning and other things. Working conditions were rough. We were forced to stay outside in freezing temps and rain and blazing sun despite there being indoor play areas to use. It was a hassle to get dogs in and out, so managers dragged their feet on letting them play inside. Full stop. Some days there felt like literal heck. Management treated me and my co-workers poorly, but I loved the dogs, so I stuck with it. It wasn't a coincidence that I developed a more severe depression than ever before in my last few years there. All of this incessant rambling just to get to my breaking point. Which looking back was pretty stupid, but I was so fed up with how tough that job was and how little recognition I received, or good pay for that matter, that I couldn't take it anymore. I had to call out due to being sick, and when I came back the next day my co-worker gave me crap for leaving them hanging like that, which really peed me off because she was one of the shittiest, most unreliable people on our team. The manager was on her side. There were so many days where I had to struggle due to understaffing or call-outs, and countless times where I came in on days off to fill in for someone. The fact that they couldn't treat me with a shred of decency after being out for one day was infuriating. So I literally said, "Frick you, I'm out, bye," turned around, clocked out, and left that place never to return. Never regret my decision, despite how sad it was to leave all of my dog pals behind. I'm sure they forgot about me soon enough. The night a guy I dated for years ran through the front door of our apartment sideways, yelling, "Honey, I know you don't approve of hard drugs, but I just smoked crack and it was awesome. Honey, I know you don't approve of hard drugs, but I just smoked crack and it was awesome." This sounds like the opening line of a stand-up routine. You got a belly laugh out of me. I was on a job interview for a dog daycare boarding kennel. It was very old-fashioned and had been there for 50+ years. For those who don't know, old school dog training is basically just abusing the dog into obedience. Anyway, the dude interviewing me was asking me how I would call over a dog that was across the yard, get their attention. I forget what my response was, but he said he throws a Kong at them. At first I thought he meant like, threw it near them or against the fence to get their attention. But no, he meant he actually pelted the dogs with the Kong. For those who don't know, Kongs are heavy dog toys made from thick rubber that really hurt if dropped or thrown at you from even a short distance. I was horrified. Needless to say, I didn't accept the job there. Went to a borderline abandoned mall in my town and started exploring one of the abandoned restaurants. Got inside, walked into the back where it was dark, noticed the words "Get Out" written in red on the wall, turned around and walked straight out. This was at one of my friend's birthday party, which he held at the last thing open at the mall, a really cool arcade place. But since the rest of the mall was abandoned, we all ran around and did stupid things. And to make it better, we were all eating from a massive tub of sour gummy worms that my friend had found, unopened, in a dumpster. So honestly, the fact that we chose to walk out while high on sugar was probably a miracle. I had something similar as a teen. We were exploring a barn just outside our village that, as far as we knew, had been abandoned for a couple of decades. We went inside and saw "If I catch you here, you're dead" written on the wall. We probably weren't the first ones to venture into this man's living place, and he was most likely sick of it. Nevertheless, a really scary experience for a 14-year-old. Not me, but a coworker. I worked at Baskin Robbins and we had an awful manager owner who treated us like complete crap. One day, a woman came into our store and ordered a 1-scoop sundae, cost $5.99 at the time. Only after we had made her the sundae and rang her up did she present us with a coupon for $1 off any sundae, but it had expired in 1991. This took place in 2015 or 2016. When my coworker apologized and said we couldn't take the coupon, she flipped out and started cursing at us, claiming that it was illegal for us to not take her coupon because coupons never legally expire. We ask her to calm down as there are kids in the store and she demands we call our owner, so we do. And being the absolute prick that he is, he tells us that we're costing him business by upsetting a customer and that he's going to take the price of the Sunday off my coworker's paycheck and that he's going to get an official write-up for being rude to a customer. After hearing this, my coworker left the phone hanging from the wall, took off his apron and calmly flipped the lady off as he walked out of the store. I had to work a busy summer night alone and ended up staying 2 hours late to close everything and clean the store. The whole night I wished I had the courage to do something like that. I've never seen or heard from him again, but he will forever be a legend in my mind. A couple of months ago I was at Oak Point Park in Dallas, Texas late evening and I thought I heard a kitty mewing in the woods, so I went into the woods to find it just in case it was someone's pet. I got pretty close to where the sound was originating from and it stopped. I waited a couple of minutes and didn't hear anything, and then I took a pee and was about to head back. While I was draining the lizard, I got a really horrible feeling and I noticed out of my peripheral vision some figure watching me from about 20 feet away in a clearing of dead fallen trees. I turned towards him and in the dim light I noticed he was at least half naked and very disheveled. He then meowed at me and I took off, still pee, the opposite direction. I'm laughing picturing someone running while pee, terrified, haha. My friends and I were down in Miami for spring break one year and we wandered into a sort of crappy part of town and were walking around after getting hammered and we came across an old homeless African American dude named Linwood who was messing with the chain on his bike because it got messed up. We started chatting with him and he's clearly a bit on the odd side but also really cool, and we agree to follow him to a local bar for some fun. So we get to the bar and it's one of those little places that somehow crammed 8 or 10 pool tables in, so it's just everyone olaying pool and slamming beers. Linwood kind of sucks at pool at first and we start messing around playing for money with random guys, only like $5 for the next beer, etc. Linwood bets a guy and loses but has no money, so when he loses to this guy I offered to pay the $5 for him and he was grateful. But then Linwood and I am thinking what the frick, but I'm hammered. Turns out Linwood is good at pool, like really good at pool, and he's a hustler. He smashed this guy and split the $100 with me and then told us to follow him because he had to buy some weed. So we leave the bar and follow him down this shady but dark road and up these stairs into an apartment, and everybody there is just staring at us because they knew we weren't from around there. Linwood buys some weed and then we go out back and he asks us if we want to get some women. And we say sure. He tells us to hang on and he goes back up into the apartment and comes back down with 3 of the biggest, ugliest women I've ever seen and says they'll blow all 3 of you for that $50 you got. And that is where crap got too weird and I told Linwood our adventure was over and we needed to get back to our hotel, lol. You went like 4 or 5 steps further in that scenario than I ever would. When my emotionally abusive ex started threatening physical violence against our less than a year old child for things like crying or touching stuff. Few years back I had a job interview agreed on for a specific time, but when I showed up it became clear that the company had scheduled multiple interviews with multiple applicants at the same exact time. That wouldn't have been a problem itself, but there was only 2 interviewers who both spoke to people one at a time, so by my estimate I could have been forced to wait over an hour for my interview. There was no specific queue, even though I had agreed on a specific time with the recruiter. So I left pretty much instantly because if the company doesn't care that they're wasting the applicant's time like this, then I was afraid what kind of employer they would turn out to be. Nearly 18 years ago on New Year's Eve, my friends and I were all tripping on shrooms when one suddenly had the great idea to call up a friend of his that he knew I liked and invite her over. She said sure if she could bring her friend. I believe not knowing we were tripping, and I was already thinking about napping out considering I was pretty damned high and didn't want to make an idiot of myself in front of her. So we took a walkabout to meet her halfway, which ended up being right in front of a police station. Bad enough. Then as we got closer, we realized it wasn't her, but her underage 15-year-old sister, WTF FUU, and 14-year-old friend, who my buddy was actually talking to on the phone without realizing. Nope. I kept walking right to the train station and went home. On the plus side, I did end up getting together with the girl I liked, and we've been married 15 years. Her sister still insists my friend knew it was actually her on the phone, and honestly it wouldn't surprise me. Dude was a perv. A couple years ago I was working as a stock boy in a grocery store. They fricked up my schedule and put me working while I had class, even after submitting my schedule 3 times. After not coming into work, they suspended me and said that I would have to talk to my boss. I said frick it and left. Never went back to work there. High school, 2006. I was one of the first people in my very small group of friends to get a license and a car of my own. One day, my buddy Tom asks if I can drive him a short ways out of town to hang out with my girlfriend some other friends. Tom was a frickin' weird dude. Gangly, deathly pale, perpetually moist, greasy haired, and he had this infected patch of ingrown hair coming out the side of his face that he refused to get treated. He was also kind of a creep, but more on that later. We drive out after school and it's clear that Tom has very little idea where he's going. After bombing up and down a few dirt roads in the woods, he declares that this rundown ramshackle house with missing shingles and trash strewn around the yard is the place we're looking for. In an impressive piece of forethought, I back the car in and leave the doors unlocked. We knock on the door, and it's opened by a girl who doesn't look a day over 13. She appears to be alone in the house, and she is not happy to see Tom. Turns out Tom has been creeping on this girl online. They've never met before, and she had explicitly told him to stay the frick away. Apparently he conjectured more or less where she lived, and made a lucky guess while we were driving around. Yeah, Tom roped me into driving him to go try to frick the 13-year-old he was stalking. In my culture we consider this a dong move. Anyone who lives in redneck country can guess what happened next. A rusted pickup truck with no exhaust comes bouncing down the road, and 3 or 4 gigantic cornfed Hoosier boys hop out. I'm already backing away, and they move in between us. They're clearly focused on the impending beatdown of Tom, so I make a break for it and get the car fired up. Tom is still protesting his innocence, insisting that they are together and they love each other, blah blah, utterly failing to comprehend the butt beating that was about to occur. These boys are literally cracking their knuckles. I scream his name and finally get his attention. I look right at him and declare, "Get in the fricking car or I will leave you here." He scurries into the car and the boys let us tear out of there unimpeded. It was an awkward ride back to his house. Tom and I were not friends after that incident, as tense as it was at the time. In retrospect the boys treated us with extreme leniency given that from their perspective these 2 dudes from town had driven out there to frick a 13-year-old while she was alone in her house. I wish I had been savvy enough to recognize bulls when I heard it and not put myself in that situation in the first place. Frickin' Tom. Yep, Tom roped me into driving him to go try to frick the 13-year-old he was stalking. In my culture we consider this a dong move. In bird culture this is considered to be accessory to statutory violation at best. Worked at a fast food restaurant as a teenager. It was a locally owned small business, not franchise. The owners were also the chef and manager. They were first-generation immigrants from Korea. They barely spoke any English, and did a lot of stuff that wasn't exactly up to OSHA guidelines. We had a health inspection once while I was there, and that was when I realized they actually knew they were violating health and safety code, because they had me spend all day cleaning the day before. Some of the stuff that I saw while I was there: thawing chicken by leaving it on a cutting board on top of an open trash can all day long, leafy greens in the fridge under raw chicken, no shelf between them. Mind you, we're talking a tub of greens with a half-zipped gallon Ziploc full of chicken just sitting on top of the lettuce. Reusing single-use gloves. Each employee was allowed 1 glove per day. They actually did use a probe thermometer to check meat temps, but they never cleaned the probe after, just wiped it off at the end of the day. On their apron, all dishes were done by hand, but the water heater was so small that by the time we were halfway through the dishes, we'd have no hot water left, meaning half the dishes wound up improperly cleaned. The last straw for me was when I caught a bad cold and they first accused me of lying, insisting I was actually hungover. I told them I'd never even been drunk, which was true. I was a straight-edge teenager. I spent my free time watching anime and playing video games, and again, they said I was lying. but angrily gave me the day off as long as I promised to be in the next day. When I came in next, they told me that from then on there would be no sick days. I had to come in no matter how sick I was. I said, and I quote, "Number, frick that, that's illegal. In fact, frick you, you're going to get someone killed the way you run this place. I'm done. I quit. Goodbye." As I walked out the door I heard them yelling something about 2 weeks notice, but I wasn't going back to listen to it. My ex-wife, she was a drunk and away at training to be a flight attendant. Spent ridiculous amounts of money on getting wasted as often as possible. One night we're on the phone, argument ensues because she's drunk, and she says, "I'm tired of you. You don't do crap for me." So I hung up, called AT&T, cancelled her cell phone, called State Farm and cancelled the insurance on her car, took all her crap out of my house and stuffed it in her car, called her parents to come get her car and told them I was done. The guy who never did crap for her, except pay for literally everything, actually stopped doing crap. In the end, like 3 months later she got fired for failing to show up to work because, well, she was drunk. Story conclusion. After being fired she called me, admitted the problem, and we had a nice long talk, but it was the end for me. We both happily moved on, and from what I understand she got control of her drinking eventually and is doing well. Good on you. You were unappreciated and hopefully taught her a very valuable lesson. I worked at a factory for a month, and not only was I absolutely miserable, the work was hard and we couldn't sit for our 8-hour shift, and we were only allowed a 15-minute lunch, no breaks. Sometimes, I had to come in at 4 rather than 6 to catch up on our orders. I hopped out of there, and I got a way better job as a ride operator at a local amusement park. This happened years ago while working at a Safeway in the produce department. I worked from 1:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. 3 days a week. After 4 p.m. I was alone in the department, and as it got later in the evening I would spend my time helping the night manager with his duties because everything in my area was handled. I would help check when needed, stock other departments and clean the warehouse, all while keeping my department perfect. I asked the store manager for more hours after about 2 months of doing this extra work, and she told me if you worked harder I would consider it. So I turned around, clocked out and never came back. Was managing a popular fast food joint, and when I was about to receive my quarterly performance bonus, usually about $5K, we received word from HQ that bonuses were going to be based on performance compared to the year prior. Well, a few months before I transferred to that store, a new strip mall opened across the street that had about 5 restaurants in ITC, including 2 direct competitors. Even with that in mind and the new store sheen having worn off, we were still only down about 5%, but because we were still technically down, we didn't receive our bonuses. I started job hunting that Monday, interviewed Wednesday, hired Friday for a much better job in a field I actually liked. Didn't make any drama about it, but they had to scramble to find a new qualified person for my position. When you have people working odd schedules 60 hours a week, don't screw with their bonuses for reasons beyond their control on short notice. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.